What's up, guys? Teague from Battle City Games back with another deck profile. This is the first one after Duelist Advance, and today I'm excited to show you what I think is going to be one of the best decks for NAWCQ. If you don't want to be playing something like Malice, Mitsurugi, or Raizio that's been around, I think that this deck is going to be a top competitor going into the meta, and especially after we get Justice Hunters, but right now we're just focused on the post-Duelist Advance build, and that's going to be Vanquish Soul. This deck got 3 new cards, so it really take it to the next level. It gave it everything the deck needs. I'm going to be going through the build that I think is best suited going into NAWCQ if you're looking to take this deck to that event. We're going to start off by overviewing all 3 new cards so I can give you an idea of what they each bring to the deck, and then we'll jump into the actual profile. So first up is Vanquish Soul Holly Sue. So she is an earth monster. She has a quick effect to special summon herself from your hand by revealing any other Vanquish Soul monster. And then on field, just like most other Vanquish Souls, she has 2 different effects. The first effect lets you reveal a fire and dark monster to special summon any Vanquish Soul monster from your deck. The second effect lets you reveal a dark and earth monster to take control of the monster your opponent controls with the lowest attack on the field until the end of a turn. So a couple things to digest there. The effect to reveal a dark and fire monster to special summon means that we have much easier access to our Raisin, our Mad Love, or whatever Vanquish Soul we need in any specific situation. And the fact that her summon from hand effect is a quick effect means that we can play on turn 0. If you open Holly Sue, I like to call her Holy Sue, that was the OCG name, but if you open Holly Sue, you can reveal her during your opponent's turn when they summon their first monster, special summon her, and then if you have a fire and dark to reveal, you can do that to summon out something like a Raisin to immediately disrupt your opponent. That second effect is also very impactful because whether it's your turn or if you're trying to do this on your opponent's first turn, you can reveal that Dark and Earth monster to non-targeting take control of a monster. So against something like Malice, if they go normal summon Dormouse, and you have that ability to take it with Holly Sue, now you have their Dormouse, and it's not even in their graveyard, so they can't extend with something like a March Hare to banish it or a Bestial to banish it. They essentially have to have either Malice and Underground or March Hare plus another Malice name in hand to keep playing, and that's just one example. So this card not only is another starter, an extender, but also disruption. Pretty much everything the deck could have asked for in the main deck. Moving into the second new card, Vanquish Soul Start. So this is a field spell for the deck. It has multiple effects, starting with the first one. Once per turn, you can target a Vanquish Soul monster on your field, and then take a Vanquish Soul monster from your deck with a different attribute than that monster on the field, and add it to your hand. So again, this allows us to search for whatever Vanquish Soul attribute we need, and it also turns Mad Love into a starter for the deck, which she wasn't previously. So this is an outstanding effect, just being able to fix our attributes in hand, make sure we always have whatever we need in order to get the maximum value out of our Vanquish Souls. But that's not the only effect this card has. It also has another effect where once per turn, if a Vanquish Soul monster or monsters you control would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can reveal any Vanquish Soul monster in your hand to prevent that destruction. So this is a great effect to help protect from board wipes like Murakumo, make it more difficult for your opponent to get through your Vanquish Soul monsters with something like a detonator. Very versatile, and something that's also easy for your opponent to forget about and maybe put them in a little bit of an awkward situation if they didn't set their line of play up correctly with that in mind. And the third effect on this card is also very powerful. During your end phase, if you control 2 or more different Vanquish Soul monsters, you can set a Vanquish Soul trap from your deck. So now we have much easier and more consistent access to Vanquish Soul Snow Devil, which is going to be another powerful form of disruption during our opponent's turn. So these 2 cards I just reviewed both add an incredible amount of consistency and increase the overall ceiling of the deck. The final card is not quite as powerful, but still a worthy inclusion in the deck, and in all of my testing it has come up in a variety of situations, so definitely still great to have it. And that's going to be Vanquish Soul Rocks, which is a new Exceed monster for the deck. So it requires 2 level 4 Vanquish Soul monsters, but you can also exceed summon it on top of any Vanquish Soul monster or Rock of the Vanquisher during the turn in which a Vanquish Soul monster battled. So you don't have to take 2 level 4s. Typically, you're just going to use its alternate summoning condition based on what you want to overlay it on top of. And it is important to keep in mind what you overlay it on top of, because it does have 3 different effects depending on what attributes it has. If it has a dark monster, your opponent's monsters lose 800 attack. If it has a fire monster, your monsters gain 1000 attack. And if it has an earth monster, you can detach a material to non-targeting, destroy 1 card your opponent controls. So the dark and fire effects can be great for helping you push for game, making it harder for your opponent's monsters to push over your Vanquish Soul monsters. But for real star here is going to be the earth attribute effect, being able to use your Caesar effect to non-targeting destroy a card, and then overlay this on top of that Caesar, detach the Caesar, and non-targeting destroy another card. Just really helps you clean up your opponent's board in a lot of situations. And then also this can be a Zeus line for us, because we can battle with any other Vanquish Soul monster, exceed into this, and then as long as it exceeds monster battle that turn, whether it was ours or our opponent's, we can make Zeus on top of rocks. Not the most common interaction, but it can come up, and it's important to know that that's a line for you if you need to go down that route. So all 3 very powerful cards. Like I said, I wanted to overview each card specifically, kind of talk about what it brings to the deck, and now we'll go ahead and get into the profile itself. So starting off with the monsters, of course, we've still got triple copies of Vanquish Soul Raisin. So just the most powerful starter for the deck still, just being able to grab you any Vanquish Soul name from your deck to hand on summon, as well as having the destruction effect for monsters in its column, and even the ability to reveal a fire monster to protect itself can come up, and also helps you trigger your Xiaolong very easily. A card that's probably always going to be played at 3 in the deck, and definitely still the card we want access to the most. From there, a new 3 of in the deck. Previously, she was typically a 1 of, and that's going to be triple copies of Dr. Madlove. The fact that on summon she searches for a Vanquish Soul spell or trap means that we can search Vanquish Soul start. Stake Your Soul obviously used to be a starter for the deck, still is a starter, but it's not a Vanquish Soul card, so it kind of sucked that Madlove couldn't actually search that card for you. But now, summon Madlove, search start, target Madlove to search a Holy Sue or a Raisin is a completely valid line of play that will get you into all of your combos, so it's great to have the additional starters in the deck now. And honestly, her non-targeting bounce effect, that when you reveal a dark and earth monster to return a monster on the field with the lowest defense to the hand, is another great form of disruption, especially if you have Madlove and something like a Holly Sue set up. They both have very high defense, so just about anything that your opponent starts with, you'll be able to disrupt with the Madlove and return it to hand. Again, very powerful interaction against a deck like Malice, where they typically would prefer to get that name in the graveyard versus having it back in hand. Moving on from there, we have triple copies of the brand new Holly Sue. Definitely, like I said in the intro, a card that acts as both a starter and extender for us, as well as another point of disruption, and a card that we want to maximize 3 copies of. It's also great to have another powerful Earth attribute in the deck. Earth is typically the weaker of the 3 attributes in terms of what you're looking to be able to reveal, but it is still good to have Vanquish Soul Earth names other than Caesar Valius and Pantera, who Pantera herself is not the strongest Vanquish Soul name. So great to have Holly Sue fill that role now. For some of the other high-level Vanquish Soul monsters, we are on triple copies of Borger. I've seen some lists opt to only play 1 copy, and I don't really think that's correct. Not only is Borger powerful with its own effect to either draw you a card during both turns or to burn your opponent for 1500, but being a dark attribute is important to synergize with your Holly Sue now, and also just the ability to dodge targeting with his quick effect means that cards like Infinite Impermanence and Effect Veiler are just incredibly weak into Vanquish Soul. It makes it harder for your opponent to effectively trade detonator pops as well, Because if you go raise an effect, for example, they chain Detonator, you chain Borger, they now have to chain Detonator again to pop that Raisin in order to keep you from getting the bounce there. So it just gets the materials off the Detonator that much more quickly. And just overall, I think a card that deserves the 3/0 slot in the deck. Moving on from there, another name that people are a little up in the air about as far as ratios is Xiaolong. Currently, I see people going between 1 and 3 copies of this card. I think post K9, most people will be on 3 copies. I like 2 copies because he does need to reveal 2 fire monsters in order to get his search effect. It can be a little more clunky to set up in the early game, and he's not going to start your plays on his own, and he doesn't allow you to dodge targeting like something like Borger does. So I found 2 to be a sweet spot. Yes, you want a good amount of fire attributes, but we're rounding out that 3rd slot with a different fire attribute monster that you'll see later on in the profile. So 2 copies for now. And then for the last Vanquish Soul monster, 1 copy of Caesar Valius. We can recycle this with Rock, of course, getting it back to her hand. We can search this with a Bestial, which you'll see. So I don't think you need more than 2 copies. He is one of the worst names to open with in your hand. He's not going to start your combo. He's not going to help you dig like a Borger would. And again, Earth is still an important attribute to have, but not the most important attribute. So we're not worried about playing multiple copies of him when he's not the most effective card to start or extend our combos. He's much better as a disruption. So that does it for the Vanquish Soul monsters. Moving into the hand traps. We have triple copies of Molcharmy Fuelos. Unfortunately, this card is off attribute for the deck, but Meowth just isn't strong enough going into the next format, I think, in order to justify a main deck slot, and certainly not at 3 copies. Fuelos still hits pretty much every deck in the format that we're going to be expecting at the higher levels, and your opponent's going to have to make a tough decision when you drop Fuelos, because every draw they gives you also gives you the potential to set up a Holly Sue play on their turn and have even more disruption. So it's going to put your opponent in a very awkward situation whenever you activate this card against them. And then for the other Molcharmy, we are on a single copy of Purulia. I would like to play more Charmies. 5 to 6 is kind of where I typically feel comfortable, but with Vanquish Soul, it's kind of always been a thing. You want to focus on making sure that your hand traps also synergize as attributes, because you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you have multiple alt attribute hand traps and you're not able to get your Vanquish Soul cards rolling. Stake Your Soul, being able to reveal a hand trap to get you into play, is a very viable option. So we don't want to have too many alt attribute hand traps and just cause the deck to be clunkier than it would need to be. But I did want to play more than 3, and I think, again, Purulia is going to hit the wider variety of decks going into the next format than something like Meowth, where you may not get draws against Vanquish Soul, you may not get draws against Ryzeal or things like that, and even against decks like Malice or Lunalight, you may get a very limited number of draws. So I chose to go with Purulia for that slot. And then, of course, it wouldn't be a Vanquish Soul deck without triple copies of Ash Blossom. It's great that Vanquish Soul benefits from playing one of the most powerful hand traps in the game. Ash has always been good. She is still good, and I think she gets a little bit better going into this format because there's more decks that are going to be heavily disrupted, potentially by an Ash Blossom that's timed correctly. So that's why we're on 3 copies, as well as being the ever-important fire attribute. From there, I'm choosing to play 2 copies of DD Crow. I think DD Crow is incredibly powerful going into this upcoming format. The ability to hit the Mitsurugi spell out of your opponent's graveyard, to target Ryzeal names, to target Eclipse Twins, as well as against something like Mermail, being able to interact with their graveyard, Crystron, Vanquish Soul, some of these decks that aren't going to be putting light and dark attributes into the graveyard, but can still be disrupted by targeted interaction with the graveyard. So I think DD Crow is actually going to be a sleeper hand trap for NAWCQ, and I think that it's a great pick for a deck like Vanquish Soul, where you also benefit from that attribute. From there, another little bit of a bold choice. We're on double copies of Ghost Spell and Haunted Mansion. She's an Earth attribute, so she does give us the additional Earth attributes. All in all, with our Holly Sue, our Caesar, and these 2 copies of Bell. We're on 6 total Earth attributes, which gives us a decent enough number to be able to consistently reveal. And also Ghost Bell does have some powerful interactions. She's strong into Mitsurugi. She can be strong into Malice. She does hit Ryziel at certain points, especially if your opponent's on the Dododo engine now. She's good into Vanquish Soul when they try to add something back with Rock. So she has a variety of interactions going into this upcoming format, and I can see her being a little bit of a sleeper pick as well. One of my favorite interactions with her is the fact that she can hit Mitsurugi prayers because it can add back from the graveyard, which means you can save your Ash Blossom for another important card such as Habakiri and Dasaji, and essentially cut your opponent off from 2 lines of play for Mitsurugi. So I really like her, and again, she does rend out that Earth attribute for us. Another bold pick is going to be double copies of Skullmeister. Originally this was Droll and Lockbird, and I was playing a 41 card build, but I decided that I valued the attribute interaction more than the 3 copies of Droll and Lockbird in the main deck. Rest assured, Droll is in my sideboard for this deck, but I did feel that having more attributes to make sure we were more consistently able to trigger our Holly Sue, our Raisin, etc. was going to be important. And I think Skullmeister can be another one of those sleeper picks going into this format. It hits a lot of Luna Light cards in the graveyard. It hits the Mitsurugi cards. Being able to Skullmeister your opponent's Saji after they summon it off Habakiri and tribute it can shut down your opponent's turn because they're not going to be expecting a Skullmeister more than likely. So there are some strong interactions for it in the deck. And again, it's a hand trap that most people are not going to play around, which makes it that much more powerful when they play into it. And then for a couple other hand traps, we are on 2 copies of Bystial, Bystial Magnamut, Bystial Jurisworm. These are typically the 2 most powerful Bystials. Magnamut can search our Caesar Valius, which is great. Jurisworm's always a powerful disruption. If you didn't want to play Skullmeister, you could potentially sneak a Baldrake in here as well. But like I said, I do like the Skullmeister, and I think 2 Bystials is good, especially when paired with the Crow. Gives us that versatility in what we want to banish from our opponent's graveyard. And then for the last, it's not a hand trap, but it is a disruption of sorts. I'm choosing to play 1 Dogoron, the Mad Flame Kaiju. This is an Earth attribute, so with our Raisins, our Ash Blossoms, our Xiaolongs, and this, we're at 9 total fire attributes. Excuse me, I think I said Earth before, but 9 total fire attributes. And the reason that I like this card is particularly because of Luna Light. We play enough hand traps that we will probably be able to disrupt our opponent from setting up multiple Liger Dancers on their turn if we're going second, game 1. And then if we have Dogoron, just being able to tribute over that Liger Dancer gives us a very easy answer to our opponent's board, and it sets us up to be able to play perfectly fine. Also into Ryziel, if they don't set up the Eclipse Twins, or if you have something like a Crow or a Ghost Spell, being able to just Dogoron over their Detonator and then play from there, again, it's great. I chose to go with Dogoron over something like Kurikara because Kurikara requires our opponent to activate effects. So against something like Luna Light, they're going to hold their Liger Dancer until they absolutely have to use it, at which point you've gone through a lot of your Vanquish Soul names, so even if you Kurikara tribute their Liger Dancer, you're not going to have the follow-up that you need. I would rather deal with the threat immediately and then play through my normal Vanquish Soul lines. So that's the reason for the Dogoron. I really like this card. I think it's, again, good. Something your opponent's not going to expect, and something that has application into every matchup. No matter what you're playing against, the type of boards that decks are setting up right now can be disrupted by something like a Dogoron. Probably the weakest matchup for it is going to be into pure Mitsurugi, because we don't really want to tribute our opponent's cards. But even in that, if we maybe force an early purification and our opponent tributes for Murakumo and brings it back, and then we can just tribute it back off of a Dogoron, that's not too bad. So there are even applications for Dogoron in that matchup. That's it for the monsters. Moving into the spells, we have triple copies of Stake Your Soul, of course. This card didn't get any weaker with the new support. If anything, it got better. and this is still our best way to get into something like a Mad Love or a Raisin from the deck, or of course Holly Sue if the situation calls for it. But just having an extender for a deck in case your opponent does disrupt your normal summon is always great. And then we are on that one copy of Vanquish Soul Start. I don't think you need multiple copies of this card in the deck because it is so searchable by Mad Love. And even though it says Start in the name, it's not actually a starter. You need a Vanquish Soul monster on board to be able to use it. So we can't just draw Start plus Borger and be able to play. We have to have a Vanquish Soul that we can get onto the board in order to be able to play. I don't think you would be wrong for playing 2 copies of this card, but with space and wanting to make sure I was able to play other consistency cards and also play the amount of hand traps and disruptions I wanted to, I decided to go with a 1 copy. Speaking of consistency cards, Double Pot of Extravagance. If you've played Vanquish Soul before, you know a lot of our extra deck is disposable. As long as we have Rock of the Vanquisher, the rest we can kind of live without. And extra, being able to dig 2 cards deeper is going to help us find those Vanquish Soul starters, and also helps to bait out cards like Ash Blossom. There's pretty much no situation your opponent's going to let Extravagance resolve if they have Ash Blossom, which then frees up cards like Stake Your Soul and Raisin or Mad Love to be able to resolve to, again, get your combo going. So whether you're baiting an interaction or digging deeper into your deck, Extravagance is a great choice for the deck. And for even more consistency, we have Pot of Prosperity. Just being able to dig 6 cards into your deck pretty much guarantees that you find a Vanquish Soul card if you don't already have what you need. And for post side, it can dig it for your sideboard cards. It can dig for Dogoron, Game 1. Again, if you need Clear Lunalight or a detonator. So versatility, and again, especially with Pot of Prosperity, we get to choose what cards we're getting rid of, so we can make sure we just keep our Rock of a Vanquisher plus whatever else we feel like we'll need. And again, more consistency. 1 copy of Reinforcement of the Army. This just grabs Raisin straight from the deck. It plays into Droll. There's a couple of cards in this deck that play into Droll, but what I like with the addition of a card like Holly Sue is we can play under Droll now more than we could previously. And of course, if we don't have a Vanquish Soul card, we need to find one, so we're always going to play Rhoda to find that Raisin. I'm not playing a card like Durandal in this deck. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think a card like Small World is necessary. I would rather play high-value cards like Extravagance and Prosperity versus a card that's going to make me go -1, or a card like Durandal that's going to require me to get a monster onto board, which if I'm normal summoning a hand trap to equip it to Durandal, I'm not normal summoning the Raisin that I just added with the Durandal. So anytime I've played Durandal in the deck, I found it to be very awkward, especially going first, which is another reason I chose to go with the Extravagances and the Prosperities instead. And then for the last card in the deck, 1 copy of Snow Devil. Again, being able to search this card with the field spell now is great, and it is incredibly good disruption. Even if your opponent manages to clear your Vanquish Soul monsters off board or negate their effects or whatever they may do, being able to flip Snow Devil, establish a Vanquish Soul monster back on the board, burn your opponent, make your Vanquish Soul monsters indestructible by card effect, and destroy all of your opponent's monsters. This card just does so much in 1 card. We absolutely want access to it in the deck. Not playing multiple copies, not playing any of the other Vanquish Soul traps, because typically once we resolve it once, we're going to be set up in a position where we can win the game when it comes back to our turn, and we don't want to throw too many bricks into the deck for going second either. That does it for the main deck. Just to talk about a couple of notable absences from the deck, or maybe notable depending on how you look at it. We're not playing Pantera. She is a level 4, which I like, but you've heard me say it before, Earth is not the most important attribute for the deck, and her effect, Spell and Trap Destruction, is nice, but it's not as powerful as something like Mad Love or Raisin when it comes to disruption. And then we're not mainboarding a card like Dust Devil. I do think you can sideboard that card, but again, we want consistency going first, and we want cards that are going to disrupt our opponent going second. and not require us to kind of get a couple of Vanquish Soul monsters on board to get maximum value. I think that card does serve you best in discerned matchups like Malice, where going first, even if you only have one body on board, you can Dust Devil very first normal summon, flip it face down, and now they don't have access to that Malice name. So I think there's applications, but I think it's better coming out of the sideboard. Moving into the extra deck now. Of course, triple copies of Rock of the Vanquisher. I see some lists play this at 2, but I think the extra deck has plenty of space that you can fit 3. This is a card that's going to keep your combos going and let you play. And in a grind game, you do want to make sure you always have a copy of this available in your extra deck, especially since we're playing Extravagance. I've Extravagance and Banished 2 multiple times, so having that third copy to be able to ensure we have access to it is crucial. From there, a couple of other Link monsters. 1 IP Masquerena, 1 SP Little Knight. SP Little Knight, obviously very flexible, versatile removal. And now, because we can overlay Vanquish Soul rocks onto our Rock of the Vanquisher, means very Rock of the Vanquisher can essentially be used as Link material to go into an SP for disruption in main phase 2. IP Masquerena doesn't come up too much. It's kind of a flex spot, so feel free to play around with that slot. But there are times where you can leave it on an inboard, especially if you've played through some disruption. And then on your opponent's turn, maybe put out a Holly Sue, steal their monster, and then link off that monster with the IP for an SP. So there's plays there. But again, if you feel like you'd really like to include something else in the deck, feel free to play around with that slot. And then a Lunalight inspired pick. 1 Underworld Goddess of the Closed World. We have a Dogoran in the main board, but we also want an extra deck option to be able to access to out something like a Liger Dancer. It isn't too hard for us to put 4 bodies on board. Theoretically, your opponent should look when you have 4 bodies and say, okay, I want to use my Raigeki effect now and wipe your board. But we might be able to bait the Raigeki earlier, or maybe our opponent just doesn't do that. We want to make sure we have Underworld Goddess as a clean out to the Liger Dancer. I think if you go into NAWCQ and you don't have a Game 1 out to Liger Dancer, you're going to lose a lot of Game 1s against Lunalight. So we want to be prepared, which is why we have a main board out plus a extra deck out. That's it for the Link monsters. Moving into the Exceeds, the 1 Vanquish Soul Rocks that we saw earlier in the intro. I think this card is fine at 1. It's versatile. You can do a lot with it depending on the situation and the game state, but it's not a card we're making on our inboard. It's not a card we're even going to go into every game, so I don't think we need to worry about multiple copies. And while the extra deck is flexible, I'm choosing to maximize those flex spots with some different power options, which you'll see. But I do think 1 absolutely should have a copy of this card in your extra deck. For another Exceeds, 1 Baguska. Backup plan is throw Baguska down and hope that it's enough. Not something we're going to go into a lot, but it is something that you can make if you find yourself heavily disrupted and you just have 2 level 4s on board. And then we have Zeus and Tython. We have space, so I always like to play Tython kind of as a grind game way to end games in very simplified game states. And Zeus, again, because we have Vanquish Soul Rocks, we can make the Zeus off of that if it Exceeds battled that turn. So we definitely do have ways to get into Zeus. And then we are playing the rank 5 package in this deck with Nash Knight and CXYZ Nash Knight. Even though we don't have the K9 cards yet, it is very easy to get a Holly Sue plus a Xiaolong on board and be able to go into Nash Knight. And then we can use Nash Knight to non-targeting remove a card from our opponent's board, and then Exceeds up into CXYZ Nash Knight. And then we can use our CXYZ Nash Knight to get our C104 Umbral Horror Masquerade on board. So let me back up. If you are not familiar with the Nash Knight package, Nash Knight itself is a rank 5. It just requires any 2 level 5 monsters. It has a quick effect to detach 2 materials. You take a number Exceeds monster between 104 and 107. 101 and 107 from your extra deck and attach it to it, and then non-targeting attach a monster from your opponent's board to it. So like I said, this removal, it also can put number 104 Masquerade underneath itself with that effect. CXYZ Nash Knight can overlay itself on top of Nash Knight for no reason. It can just do it. So once we've absorbed our opponent's monster, we don't technically have to absorb their monster, but typically you're going to. So once we've done that, we can exceed into CXYZ Nash Knight. CXYZ Nash Knight allows us to detach material to then exceeds into any number monster between 101 and 107. So theoretically what you'll have done is you'll use your Nash Knight effect, attach Masquerade. You'll then Nash Knight on top of your Nash Knight, use that ability, detaching your own Nash Knight, and then you can uprank into C104 Umbral Horror, which has a quick effect disruption when your opponent activates a monster effect on field. Detach your material, negate that effect, send a random card from your opponent's hand to the graveyard, and if you do, have your opponent's life points. So it's a negation, it gets a card out of our opponent's hand, and it has their life points, which makes them that much easier to kill with something like a Borger. There are other cards you can play in this rank 5 package, but I really like this one for being a form of negation while also disrupting our opponent's hand with that discard effect. But that's a package, again, very easy to get into because it's very easy to put a Holly Sue plus a Xiaolong on board. And then the last option for that Nash Knight package is C107 Neo Galaxy Eyes Tachyon Dragon. This is essentially another out to Liger Dancer. This is a 4,500 attack monster that allows you to detach material, and until the end of the turn, you negate the effects of all other face-up cards on the field, and your opponent cannot activate cards or effects on the field for the turn. So what this is, we can overlay into our Nash Knight, do that route, make our CXYZ Nash Knight, and then just overlay this on top of it with the CXYZ Nash Knight effect. And now we have a 4,500 body that can run over a Liger Dancer. So like I said, your opponent may disrupt if you get 4 bodies on board, but if you can get your Holly Sue plus Xiaolong on board, you still have this as an option to out it. And it's also just a very large body, so it can just come up in other situations to kill your opponent or to run over any other large monster your opponent may have sitting around. Also, the ability to negate everything else on the board can come up in some niche situations. So that does it for the Vanquish Soul profile, guys. I know this was a little bit longer one, but like I said, I really want to explain the new cards. I want to explain some of my thought process, especially going into NAWCQ. There's a lot of questions around what we're going to be seeing, what we should be preparing for, and with this deck, I've seen a lot of talk around what the correct non-engine is, so I wanted to make sure that I made sure y'all understood why I've chosen to play the cards in the deck that I have. As always, if you enjoy the content, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll be putting out multiple other profiles after NAWCQ for some other Duelist Advanced decks, so let me know what you want to see. There's a lot of stuff in this set that I'm excited for, and I'm looking forward to bringing to you guys. Until next time, I'm Teague with Battle City Games. Take care.